Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Mary Ann Hensley, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at FreightWaves, and I'm happy to be here and happy to present this webinar in partnership with Redwood Logistics, one of the nation's fastest growing logistics providers, which is fueled by industry-leading technology and a passionate team of experts who deliver next-generation solutions for the industry. I'm thrilled to be here today with Eric Rempel, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for Redwood, to talk a bit about how critical technology is when it comes to effectively managing the supply chain and how shippers can evolve to stay ahead of the curve. Eric is going to take the stage to share some insights on how companies can use data and technology to optimize the shipping process. And after his presentation, we'll take some questions from those of you listening in as well. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, if you have any issues during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to our team via the chat function in your Zoom webinar control panel. And if you have questions that you would like to ask Eric during the Q&A, just enter those through the Q&A box in your control panel, and we'll answer as many questions as we have time for before closing our session today. We'll also be sending a link to the recording of this webinar, so if you'd like to view it again or if you'd like to share it with your peers, you'll be able to do that as well. And you should plan to receive that in the next 24 hours. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Marianne. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're at. I'm very excited to be here and discussing this really exciting topic. As Marianne mentioned, we've got Q&A at the end, but I'll do my best to watch the questions. So if there's some questions on slides in between and I can squeeze in some answers and make this a little bit more interactive, I'll do my best to do so. So again, thanks, and let's get started. So the objective today is we're going to talk a little bit about digital transportation, and I'm sure all of you have heard digital transformation. It's everywhere, and kind of what's going on there. But really what we're going to talk about are the forces driving change within digital transformation. So let's just hop in here. And a little bit about myself. So I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Redwood Logistics. I've been with Redwood for 14 years. We've been doing some really neat and innovative things and have grown very, very quickly as a nation's leading transportation provider and supply chain solution provider. And if you want to reach out, go ahead and connect on LinkedIn or Twitter. So a little bit about Redwood. Marianne gave us a great intro, but we're a full service North American logistics provider. We like to break down our service offerings into three main categories: move, manage, and innovation. So we move freight through our brokerage. We also have assets. We have a managed services arm where we will move freight for you, with you, or anywhere in between. It's a very flexible model. And on our supply chain solutions group side, we do everything from supply chain engineering to systems integration and a lot of shipper digital transformation, which we'll talk about a bit here in a moment. It's a great place to work, awesome culture, and very happy to be on this call with you today. So hopping into it, the supply chain, let's just talk about it at a very, very high level. And really what we're thinking about here is what are the objectives of any supply chain, whether it's a legacy supply chain or a modern supply chain. Shippers are really trying to do a few things. They want to delight customers and create a great experience. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure from Amazon to create this e-commerce experience where everyone knows everything and people are accustomed to information right at their fingertips, as well as controlling costs, right? So you've got these large networks and we need to manage them and maintain them and work with our partners efficiently. The ability to optimize frequently is obviously key because as things change, as the market changes, we're seeing the disruption happening in the industry. Understanding where to put your capacity, where to put your products, how to manage those, it all matters, and the ability to change quickly is important. Mitigating risks, whatever those risks are, whether they're technical, people, or process oriented, as well as managing partners very effectively. How do I have this large ecosystem of folks that it might not be my warehousing partners, it might not be my supply chain group that I'm used to working with. As we know, it's a hyper fragmented industry, so it's really critical that we really do our best to maintain visibility. So in a overall sense, right, what does it take to get it done? What does it take to accomplish all those objectives? We need to connect easily to this large ecosystem of partners, WMS providers, our own warehouses, our own ERPs. We need that data flowing in order to effectively have a supply chain that runs quickly. And then what do we do with all that data, right? We need the ability to have visibility, to be able to decide what is going on, and am I deciding with data or am I using my gut? From there, it's about controllability. Can I act on what the data is telling me, whether that data, again, depending on the maturity of your supply chain, is something that's being presented in real-time charts and graphs, or if it's a monthly report happening in Excel. Either way, how do you act on that data and manage that supply chain as close to real-time as possible? And then certainly it goes back to flexibility, which is we've discovered something about our network, we've discovered something about how we run our business, and we want to be able to adapt. How quickly can we change? So the real overall question is, how do you adapt? And so that with your connections, you can make data-driven decisions, we can execute and change to constantly react to that supply chain. So if you think about it kind of from a matrix perspective or a spectrum perspective, right? And we're using the word analog. I don't want to say that there's analog supply chains out there, but what we're really talking about is what is a traditional quote unquote supply chain like, and then what could a digital supply chain look like? And let's break it down to those 4 categories that we just discussed. So in terms of connectivity, we've, for those of us that have been in the industry long enough, even before email, right, we know that a lot of connectivity between partners when it's electronic is EDI, but a lot of voice and email and just communicating with each other the best way possible, creating these static networks where we set up connections on a point-to-point basis between partners. We press play and then we review at regular intervals. Versus a digital supply chain where it's API led, meaning we've got real data flowing between not just EDI documents, but business objects that represent instructions on what to do, ranging from serialization to barcode scanning to real-time decision making, even all the way down to blockchain smart contracts where perhaps you want to execute on a transaction immediately and then trigger automated workflow to do additional tasks. All of that has to be connected with a high-speed network that's hyper reliable and always on. From there, we talk about visibility, right? So in the analog methodology, we're looking at siloed data, doing analysis in Excel. That really doesn't go away. But as you start to mature and go down the spectrum of becoming digital, can all of that data be presented in a source where people can discover the information on their own, not just looking at KPIs and dashboards and seeing fulfillment rates and on-time percentages, but really looking at, hey, let me dig into the data and let me find patterns and trends, whether that's data science or even just operational experts trying to figure out what is going on and how can I make a difference to my business. From there, you look at controllability. How do I act on a day-to-day basis? Well, traditionally, you have functional controls within your area of execution. So you might have to, modify the order in your ERP. You might want to figure out your routing and planning within the TMS, analyze your routing guide. How do you optimize that? How do you waterfall? Maybe look at your WMS logic and, how you react to 940 and 945 EDIs within a WMS. And how do you change all of that versus can everything from all of my systems go into one type of control tower where I can have orchestrated cross-platform business logic in a digital world? And what that really means in a non-technical term is there a single place that my users can log in so that they don't have to go across all of my systems, but they can work out of one, perhaps a few different screens and have that bird's eye view of what's going on in the marketplace and being able to execute on actions, not just see. And then in terms of flexibility, what does it take in an analog world to change? Well, new partner setups, new EDI specs, new connectivity, new on-site visits, and some of those things won't go away, right? You want to shake hands and understand which partners you're working with and understand how he or she can really adapt to what your business needs. The real question is how quickly can you really change the business logic in a digital world for those connections? So connectivity is talked about at the top level, and let's just assume for the sake of a digital world that connectivity is relatively straightforward, almost as easy as plugging into a USB port. But then what do I do once I'm connected to this other party? How do I make decisions via a systematic approach, whereas data is flowing through our APIs, everything becomes a little bit easier to say, I want to change my business logic so that when I get a barcode scan and it indicates that a product is on hold, that I can automatically move that to a staging area and not create bottlenecks within my supply chain. Rapid innovation is the objective. So the forces, however, need some discussion that are driving this digital revolution, right? So we could say things like Amazon's pressure and the marketplace changing and what's really going on, but the demand for digital in supply chain management is really not that different from looking at Porter's 5 forces. And it's a Harvard study from 1979 where Michael Porter looked at, what does it take for a business to be profitable within an industry? So what are the forces that are close to a company, right, that affect its ability to serve its customers and make a profit? And so what we look for is a change in any of the forces that really normally require a business to reassess its place in the marketplace and understand the disruptions going on in its industry so it can change, adapt, and survive. And hopefully better than survive, thrive. So really, really high level, and we don't want to get overly academic here. We want to keep it at a fun high level, but you've got your buyers, right? You want to pay less and get more. Very, very simple, high level macroeconomic terms. But then if you look at the bargaining power of suppliers, right, it's the complete opposite. They want to be paid more and deliver less. What can I give? How can I create higher margins? Threat of substitutes come into play where there could be new substitute products or services that meet that same need. And obviously with threat of new entrants, and we're seeing the disruption happening all across our industry, whether you're a shipper, a 3PL, or even a carrier with the automated revolution that's taking place right now, there's new rivals seeking portions of an industry's high returns. So what does all of this have to do with digital a little bit further down? Well, really what we're talking about here is there's digital forces at play as it relates to all of the subsection of these forces. So you can look at things like barriers to entry of new entrants and product uniqueness from the bargaining power of a buyer, right? But let's take a little bit of a closer look at some forces where there's some strong digital activity going on. So the bargaining power, within the bargaining power of buyers, there's availability of substitutes. So buyers now, with all of the information availability at our fingertips, as well as the ability to connect to other partners and really change our supply chains up, I can find a better product that suits my needs or an equal product that suits my needs very easily and connect to it. So a buyer has a lot of bargaining power because of digital forces. A supplier's switching costs, those are falling. It's easier to connect and reconnect to different suppliers. So if I want to, source it from supplier B instead of supplier A, those suppliers really are feeling that pressure of a digital world where it used to be a massive EDI integration with 15 consultants working for a year to re-implement a WMS partner perhaps. That's a lot easier now. Same thing on the threat of substitutes, right? Ease of substitution. Now go to a completely new product or service entering the market, and I could say, wow, I was getting it from my supplier before, but this other service or product meets my needs and I don't even need that other product anymore. And obviously the network effect in terms of the threat of new entrants, you look at things going viral or what happens with social media, it's very easy to be disrupted where something is popular and it sweeps across, and these digital effects are making businesses go bankrupt. So there's a tremendous amount of forces at play here. And then if we just fast forward a little bit and we say, what are all the digital forces at play? Well, almost all of them. There's digital forces pushing competition and speed and agility needs into a marketplace very, very quickly, and shippers have to evolve and they have to react. And as you see, the ones that aren't highlighted in terms of digital impact are generally due to regulations and intellectual property protection. So you're thinking of government policy where you have to buy something from a certain company that has certain certifications, or government legislation, and product uniqueness certainly comes into play. But generally, all of the other forces here that, since this thing was created almost 40 years ago, they're still the same and they're being massively impacted by digital. So let's dig in a little bit to some details here. There was a study done by McKinsey around the forces of supply chain and what's going on in terms of maturity level and what digitizing your supply chain can do for your organization. So some quick key results on the left, and then we'll go to the opportunities in general. But leveraging predictive analytics can result in up to a 40% decrease in forecasting errors. Network optimization lowers your cost by 15%, where you place your assets and your warehouses, and then obviously you go into how you route them, another 15%, right? So then you look at the number of reduced touches through workflow and process automation, and then you have intelligent planning algorithms that can reduce inventory by up to 75%. So if you think about what all of that means, and then we go back to the original slides where we talk about the need to connect, have visibility, controllability, and flexibility, These are the results of those core tenets. So if you look at the right and you focus on this opportunity landscape, there's very few boxes in blue. And if you look at the legend above, there's very high maturity down to no maturity from this McKinsey study. And so the areas of high maturity, for example, if you go to the analytics column on the left, or row on the left, and then you look at S&OP and demand planning, right? That's a highly sophisticated, siloed function that a lot of businesses do very well, and it's a very, very high maturity market. But then you look at using analytics for inventory management and your ordering patterns and start going into predictive analytics, there is tremendous room for improvement there. And if you take a step back and blur your eyes a little bit, there's not a lot of blue on this chart. So there's a tremendous amount of room for improvement still in industry where we're spending billions of dollars. But if you think about the challenges here, this has to do with those 4 core tenets we talked about. How quickly can you connect? How can you see? How can you act? And then how can you adapt and be flexible? So what does that really mean? What does it mean for us? And what does it mean for our customers? So the question we ask to our shippers when we're working with them in the market and we're re-engineering and re-optimizing their supply chains is, how quickly can you connect, decide, act, and adapt? So the answer to this is, well, not so quickly. If you think about this from an IT perspective, well, when can I get to IT? We're working on a 6-year SAP implementation project. We're waiting for the new analytics server to be up and running, and IT resources are locked. Perhaps there's some M&A activity going on, and we're working to integrate a business rather than optimizing our supply chain. IT is always backlogged, and those demands continue to grow. So if you look at this analysis here, and this is a capacity gap from a MuleSoft white paper, you'll look at what's going on in IT, and I'm sure all of you feel familiar with this, which is the demands of IT are relatively straightforward when you think about traditional IT. Infrastructure, application management, keeping the lights on, but the world is changing very, very quickly, and there's additional pressure. Adopting cloud and SaaS applications. There's many, many applications for supply chain now, ranging from TMSs, WMSs, control tower applications that organizations want to purchase and leverage, and IT needs to take care of those and implement and integrate those. Same thing with data and IoT. What are those analytics projects going on? Do we have a big data strategy? Do we get streaming data from our sensors and we're looking to predict what's going to happen within our supply chain? And then certainly there's transforming the whole organization to be digital, where we look at our value proposition and then we expose those via an API-led methodology so that the world can consume our capabilities. Well, all of that leads to this massive IT delivery gap, creating this absolute need to change. But are we going to triple, quadruple, 5x our IT CapEx and OpEx budgets? The answer is likely no. So as time goes on, this gap continues to grow. So what does a shipper in the supply chain do when they have limited IT resources that are always backlogged and they need to connect? They need to change their supply chain. So this is where, Redwood is really proud of what we do for our customers, which is we say, let's focus on the business application and requirements for optimizing your supply chain and automating and optimizing as much as possible and simplify what has to happen with IT. So the way we look at it and what we do with our customers is we say, in general, what are people looking for? And we can synthesize everything we've talked about on this webinar today down to there's enterprise connectivity that happens within my organization. And there is this market forces, there's these market forces that are demanding that we change, right? We have to deliver valuable solutions. We need to connect to the marketplace. We need to innovate faster. Well, in reality, what everyone's asking for is synchronized connectivity, that we can interact with the outside world just as easily as our ERP system talks to our financial system, that I can talk to all of my carriers and my warehouse providers just as easily as I can talk to any application within my enterprise. And then you look at the requirements. Well, the requirements in terms of technical and business requirements certainly vary from organization to organization, but everyone wants low risk, high value implementations. So what do you need to get there? Well, if you think of any project that you may have been a part of, you really want to think about, do I have a partner that has supply chain best practices and technology best practices? Do they know and can they speak both languages? So what we've done is we've really focused on the ability to deliver that. And without making this overly salesy, and that's not the point of this presentation, it's really to educate. This is how we look at the world, and we believe this is how shippers and service providers should look at the world, which is, let's focus on this center box. Let's focus on, what do you want to be? How do you want to become that type of digital organization? And what is the most frictionless way to get you there? So we look at Redwood Connect as this ability to engineer, connect, and run integrated supply chains. And overall, what we say we do is we help shippers transform their supply chain by integrating and optimizing their systems, processes, and partners. And so what does it look like to our customers, right? So if you think about everything that we've been discussing here, we're really talking about that our customers have their own enterprise. They've got SAP, they've got Oracle, they've got Manhattan, JDE, they've got planning systems. It doesn't matter. You have an enterprise and you have data. So what do you want? You want what's on the right side of the screen. You want real-time synchronized connectivity between carriers, partners, vendors, systems, data providers. All of that needs to be working in unison so that these actions and transactions and activities and business logic are all flowing seamlessly. So you need to be able to connect anything to anything. And the result is the other white box below, which is you need total visibility and control. But getting there, as we discussed on the previous slide, is difficult. So what we do is we help with solution engineering, which is, what is your current state? What do you want your future state to look like? Then we deliver upon that promise with solution delivery. We create automated APIs that create that synchronization, that have business logic built in, that make it really easy to plug and unplug from the marketplace. We have project managers and success management and continuous improvement so that no one needs to worry about, will this project go well? Will this project go on time? We are trained to make sure that we take that heavy lifting off, going back to that IT demand gap, so that our customers can say, I want my business to run like X. I want my supply chain to be impacted by Y. These are my business objectives, and we don't have to worry about converting XML into JSON and CSVs and how we do data enrichment and translations and guaranteeing that it gets to the TMS and then it broadcasts messages. We handle that. What's really important for shippers to consider is, do I understand what I want out of a digital supply chain? And so from there, our professional services group will, we've taken a case study here for a customer that has Microsoft Dynamics and they wanted to connect to MercuryGate. They want yard management software. We help them develop a dock scheduling application. They want to integrate MacroPoint and Locust Tracks, their ELD data from OmniTracks. They want driver texting and summoning through Twilio. We have document rendering through WebMerge, right? Plus all of the EDI connectivity with all of their partners in the marketplace. That sounds like a daunting task, but we handle orchestrating all of that business connectivity and value so that we're minimizing the amount of time we work with IT and maximizing the value we deliver to the supply chain folks. And then the numbers kind of speak for themselves, right? So with this particular organization, you can read these below. I don't need to go through them, but it made a massive impact on how they ship, how they look at their network, how they're driving, digital decision-making into their supply chain, and what those results do. So overall, that's kind of a super high-level recap of, what's going on in the market, how we look at digital transformation, how that's impacting supply chain, the need for IT to, be able to service more of the business than just keeping the lights on, and then what Redwood does for their customers. So at this point, I'd love to open it up for questions, and Marianne, if you want to, begin, I'm happy to connect and answer questions and continue to discuss.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. Really thought-provoking content, and I definitely appreciate the level of detail you provided to really demonstrate how to start that evolution to become more technology and data-centric. At this point, yeah, let's go ahead and dive into some questions from the audience. If you have questions for Eric and you're listening in and haven't submitted those, please just click that Q&A button in your control panel and we will get to as many of those as we have time for. Just a couple of questions come in so far. I work for a shipper. How much IT support does my company need in order to achieve this type of transformation?
That's a great question. So generally, when we're working with shippers, it's almost a too good to be true conversation. So let's break this down to reality and really talk about it. First, we work with the supply chain folks within an organization, and we really document, what do you want to accomplish from this? At which point, We then talk to their IT department and we say, okay, we know what we need. We generally need integrations from the order management system so that we can plan orders in real time, feed those back in so that you have visibility on both the status of that order. Is it planned onto a shipment? Is a carrier assigned? Have all of the supply chain checks happened? So we'll go through that whole process. But what happens within IT is we say, get us whatever you can in terms of those business objects, whether it's an order, whether it's a shipment, whether it's a request for a tracking update. So we make sure that we support all protocols and we do the heavy lifting. We do all of the data transformation, all of the scrubbing, all of the cleansing, all of the validation, so that the IT department just has to say, okay, when this event happens on this order, trigger it and send it off to Redwood, and then Redwood will then execute on it. And then when changes happen in the real world and there's information that needs to go synchronously back to our customers, we also transform it back so that their systems can just ingest it, and we've already done the validation. So IT, instead of needing to go through this large project where they have to conform to our standards, we basically say, send us whatever you can from your IT department, whether it's EDI or if you can send us file via HTTP or REST or SOAP or FTP or AS2, it doesn't matter. However you can get us data, we handle it, we do the heavy lifting, we orchestrate what happens within our Redwood Connect middleware, and then we send it back to them. So it really is a massive burden off of IT's back.
Awesome. And next question, how does blockchain factor into your technology roadmap, and where do you see the main business value of blockchain?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talk about that a lot and we think about it a lot. In terms of blockchain for a business value, I think smart contracts are going to be revolutionary. They're essentially automated workflow where everyone agrees upon it. The challenge, however, is that phrase, everyone agrees. You need your whole ecosystem to agree with your smart contract workflow, plus the IT requirements of setting up a server. So while we still believe that blockchain will absolutely revolutionize our industry, we're just not quite sure if that's 1 year away or 10 years away. So what we are doing is we are preparing all of our data to match the standards so that it can communicate with it in what we're calling business to blockchain. So because we have this middleware orchestration engine in Redwood Connect, it's very easy for us at any point in time to say, when this event happens, because that's essentially what our whole system is, it's event-driven supply chain automation. When this event happens, do I need to go write it to a distributed ledger, do a smart contract check, and then finally put it in? We're preparing for that, and our system is quote unquote stubbed out to be ready for blockchain, but we're not delivering yet because we don't want our customers to be locked into a solution. But when there are blockchain solutions that our customers want to connect to, we will handle that connectivity layer for them, as well as run any servers, whether it's Ethereum or Quorum, it doesn't matter. For us, it's just another step within our orchestration.
Yeah, great. And what is the time frame for implementation?
So it really depends on the scope, obviously, and I know people don't like it depends as an answer. You're looking for example, a TMS implementation, right? So we're Mercury Gate implementers. We've been recognized as their logistics integrator of the year. And what we do in those situations, for example, is if it's a standard implementation where you're following traditional workflows as a shipper, we have some that can be up and running in a couple of weeks where they want to leverage standard workflows, all the way ranging to Fortune 50 organizations that have highly specific workflow that will take a while to go and be on site and do change management, and that can go up to several months. But it's important to note that the connectivity piece of this used to be about 50% of our challenge. Nowadays, the connectivity part in making data move between systems and the structure and format of that data to match and real-time communicate between systems, that part is now down to a few weeks. The rest of it is user change management, training, on-site assessments, discovery sessions, future state planning. That's the kind of stuff you don't want to overly rush, and you want to make sure that you measure twice and cut once. But in terms of connectivity and automation, that part's down to just a few weeks.
Okay, great. And another interesting question, what do you think are the top 3 pain points of a shipper which negatively influence their transportation spend?
Oh gosh, You know, it really depends on the maturity level. Obviously, procurement, especially in a volatile market like ours that's quickly changing, is a really easy. Right? You know, do you have a good procurement strategy? But then it's how do you execute on that strategy? Is it just a routing guide? Do you have waterfall? Do you have a round robin strategy for the transportation side? That's a big place. And then I think that that's kind of being proactive. I think that if you look at this from a data-driven perspective and you really want to look at what is the data telling me? Do I have visibility to what's going on a daily basis? So we stop making decisions with the HIPPO principle, or the highest paid person in the organization's opinion wins versus data wins. And then that can actually give you very clear visibility as to where within the lifecycle management within transportation you have an opportunity to improve. So I would argue that it can easily start with procurement and workflow automation and better pricing, but each organization should really use data and analytics to answer those questions a little bit more strategically.
Okay, great. All right, and kind of a long question, let's bear with me. How are you managing current EDI connection over to an integrated API flow? EDI at best is managed by so many third parties, and every one connection has so many different variations. Are you a SaaS model, and what are your KPI monitors to ensure all orders and updates to partners are guaranteed in reconciliations?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and we certainly provide that as a service through Redwood Connect. So we look at EDI as just another format to come into the system, and usually EDI is not over API. It's usually over managed file transfer solutions like FTP, SFTP, AS2, et cetera. So what we do is we have a guaranteed delivery framework. So from our point of view, we guarantee that we have the object and the message, and then we leverage metadata to track it through its entire life cycle all the way to the destination system. So just imagine if data comes in, it's always tagged and always has a phone home capability. So every single piece of data that goes through the system is guaranteed never to be lost and guaranteed to get to its connection. When there are challenges, and certainly those arrive, part of our managed services offering is that we have a support team that will not only make sure it gets to its destination, but we take the first attempt at correcting it. Whether it's a GS header or some control number issue or a segment challenge with EDI, and those certainly come up, we'll do our best to auto-correct that with our support team. And if there's something that we can't fix, and almost always we can, we'll send that back to the partners to correct. But then in terms of KPIs and measurements, we don't care if it's EDI or if it's API led or if it's XML or JSON or CSVs flying through. We treat data as data. We guarantee that it gets there instantly and at high speed. And we have a highly parallelized architecture for performance. So our objective is to make sure that every piece of data gets there, whether it's EDI led or API led.
Great. And under your 3PL system, how do you audit accessorial charges?
So it really goes down to your contract management engine. So when invoices come in, obviously if they're paper, we leverage OCR and image recognition to turn that into digital documents, but you go against your contract management engine. For our customers that leverage MercuryGate, we use that a lot. We've got several other TMS applications in our ecosystem that we leverage ourselves as well that have the ability to say, I booked a load. My load is for carrier X, or whether it's a warehouse order. It doesn't matter. It's, can I hit the rating engine? Can that rating engine tell me what it's supposed to be based on the parameters? And then does that match? From there, it goes into workflow automation, and we really, really aim to do all of this by exception. So it's important as a business that you decide what your threshold is for invoice mismatch, as well as accessorial acknowledgement within a contract. So within a customer, we just profile, are accessorials allowed? Are they not allowed? What is the workflow behind them? So it's almost like, if you think about it as sub workflows on a customer by customer basis, because every single shipper is different, that we have rules that follow the audit principles that each individual shipper cares about.
Okay, great. And another question, I'm implementing a third-party TMS software, and my IT group is having several challenges on the design architecture on Microsoft AX. Do we redesign the whole thing or debug one at a time through testing?
I'm not exactly sure what the question means in terms of debug one at a time, but what we generally try to do is let the source systems do what they do and not anything more. Keep it simple is always a principle. So in the past, what we've done with Dynamics AX, because it depending on the version, it can be a bit challenging, is we'll say, how can that data come out of that system any way, shape, or form? And then let's translate it. And that's the purpose of Redwood Connect as our middleware layer. So a lot of times with AX, we'll take CSV order reports out constantly that are just continuing to come out. And then Redwood Connect will actually do the heavy lifting to say, which orders have changed? Are there any deltas between them? Do I need to resend them into the TMS? And take that heavy lifting off of AX, just let AX do its job and spit out the data that it can. And then obviously the same thing in reverse, which is what does the input data need to look like for AX, and let's make it completely consumable by the system so that Dynamics can just say, oh, here's something that a human would just say, press file, upload, and the system will accept it. We make sure that the data going in reverse is friendly to AX. So we really like to take the heavy lifting off of those source systems and do it through our middleware for that exact challenge.
Okay, great. Do you work with other 3PL companies like small regional players or a local hero, all who want to make the digital leap so they can compete better in their niche and markets?
Absolutely. Our feeling is that in this mega fragmented industry, there's big enough fish in the sea, and there's always an opportunity to please and delight shippers by partnering and working with other 3PLs, whether it's us enabling them with technology or finding ways to help engineer a supply chain solution for our customers. So we do that all the time. The latest example I would say, and I can't name names on this one, but it's a relatively large 3PL that's under a larger umbrella. And they needed reconfiguration work with their Mercury Gate environment. They want a data warehouse that we're providing to them. They want EDI visibility end to end, plus workflow and process automation across the board. So absolutely, yes. We believe in helping our community grow because we think it's what's good for one is good for all.
Great. And for supply chain shipment visibility in a hyper-fragmented industry, what do you see as the biggest data gaps?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that the ability to ingest and find meaning is probably the largest issue. Data is coming from everywhere. You integrate with some of these partners and they'll stream data to you all day long. I think the important part is to slow down on ingesting and processing everything and really think about what are the strategic priorities of my particular business and where do I have the greatest room for improvement, almost going back to that McKinsey matrix and focusing on one core area at a time. But overall, I think that speed, if you think about it from within the business, the largest challenge is really curating that data so that business users can use it, that it doesn't have to be in the hands of IT, but you create really easy tools where non-IT users get empowered to start looking at the data and finding patterns on their own. As long as IT is controlling that and you have to go down to them to request a new report and they have to modify their cubes or their dashboards and you don't have true unfederated access to data, the bottleneck will always persist.
Great. We've had a couple of questions come in about the same thing. Curious about your opinion of the newer VC-backed companies that don't have a lot of freight experience coming into brokerage, like Transfix being an example.
Yeah, listen, we think that they're trying to solve some really neat problems. If anyone was to say that these organizations are a fad, I think they'd be mistaken. Applying machine learning and data science and, finding patterns with A/B testing and constantly reevaluating your product from a design-based thinking approach is what has been disrupting industries, outside of transportation for years now. I think the challenge within transportation, and someone already brought it up in terms of a question, is the hyperfragmentation, as well as the repeatability of drivers using these apps, where eventually a shipper is going to recognize that, hey, there's a repeat pattern in terms of geography for some of these drivers, and why can't I just go to them directly? It's the same reason, fleet sizes, 86% of fleets are 6 or less trucks. is because eventually drivers want to make more dollars and they're going to go out on their own. And there's this, magic number around 5 or 6 where it just becomes a bit harder to manage beyond that. But most fleets stay small. So I think these companies are really trying to apply some great design thinking to an industry that, back to Porter's 5 forces, is ripe for disruption with a high yield within this business. But at the same time, being in this industry for a long time, and those of us with a lot of battle wounds will know that each problem is different on a day-to-day basis. So the real question isn't the happy path of automated execution for transportation management, but what do you do when it's not so happy? What do you do with these exceptions? What do you do when a driver hijacks a load? What do you do when, the brand new use case that after years and years of being in the industry, all of a sudden you hear one tomorrow? Machine learning algorithms are only as good as their ability to plan based on what's happened in the past. So with such a dynamic industry, that's a challenging problem to solve. But I give kudos to those working on it, and we're working on these solutions as well. It's a fun one, and it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years.
Great. Next question, how do you start this type of integration? Do you find your customers tend to jump in all at once, or does it work better for people to take the process one step at a time?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're a big fans of agile thinking, right? So measure twice, cut once, start at the end. What do you want your future state to look like? Work backwards from there. So what our professional services group does within Redwood Supply Chain Solutions is we start everything with a discovery session, which is what does your world look like today? First seek to understand before you make any changes. So I think it's really important to say, how do we look at what's going on within your enterprise today and really understand those pain points, interview stakeholders, work with ops, understand the pressures that they're facing on a daily basis, because they are different from shipper to shipper and 3PL to 3PL, and really understand that, at which point you then go into a phased agile approach, which is what is the stream that we can deliver that provides the most amount of value in sequential order, and then revisit that stream in subsequent phases. If we try to hit that home run all at once, it's going to be a long multi-year project that feels like those black boxes that we're marketing that we don't just do these large waterfall projects, but we really try to deliver value in incremental streams. That way you can adapt and change course. Whereas if you sit back and wait for the whole process to finish and then you don't like what you see, you've already spent all this money and you're frustrated with the results. So taking a really highly agile approach, doing current state documentation and sign off, and then future state flow in terms of both data and process, having the customer sign off on it, and then circling that the sections of that future state design so that we can say, what is our biggest impact? Is it inbound optimization? Is it FOB conversion? Is it freight audit and just getting our hands around what's going on with financials? Is it exception management and really trying to get our hands around that problem? That changes from organization to organization, but going incrementally and finding values and wins is not only good for the process, but it's good for the CFO as well to say, what am I getting for this money? What do I get in return? How long does it take? Okay, let's move on to the next phase of the project. It just creates trust and good conscience all around for the teams.
Yeah, great advice. And last question here for you. Okay, with some companies that have been in the industry for a long time, sometimes the biggest hindrance can really be fear of the unknown. Breaking away from legacy processes and systems can be really hard to do, and certainly requires a mindset shift for companies that have kind of been doing things the same way for many, many years. Where would you recommend starting when companies have that type of mindset or cultural barrier to overcome?
That's also a great question. There's that really great commercial. I don't know if anyone recalls. It's like a year or two old, maybe even more. It was a GE commercial that says "Change is scary," and it was a very funny looking, almost Dr. Seuss monster that blossomed into this beautiful thing. But human beings, change management, change is scary. It's scary for everyone, whether you're a digital organization or not. I would go back to the previous statement, which is to do a discovery and an assessment and figure out what is low-hanging fruit. It could be a proof of concept. It could be a very small program where the best way to eat that elephant, right? One bite at a time. is take a small bite and see what it does for the organization. So by way of example, to be less vague about it, a lot of times we'll work with shippers and we'll say, all right, what are your challenges? And the first thing is, and this is perhaps a bit dated in terms of an example, is we do all of our routing off of a map on a wall in our warehouse. We're not seeing that as much anymore, but we've seen that many a times. And so why don't we start by taking all of your contracts and putting them into a routing guide and giving all of your warehouse operators a simple app or a terminal where they can see the OD point pair and select the optimal carrier. From there, you can go into an ERP integration where the orders are automatically getting rated and routed. From there, you can then say, hey, let's turn on automated tendering and dispatching. From there, you can say, let's do some orchestration and execute some WMS traffic and get some orders communicating. But I think in terms of change management, whether it's in the supply chain office or it's the C-suite or working with the CFO, is start small, justify a project by saying, I believe that there's this opportunity for change and improvement, whether it's reducing cost, increasing revenue, or increasing productivity. And, just taking a small bite and measuring it and then saying, okay, that was phase one. And now let's continue to be agile and expand this proof of concept into something that we deliver and roll out to more of our organization. But yeah, change is scary. And I would argue that education and use cases and case studies and the mathematical exercises of ROI, what could it impact? What would the impact be if we decided to go down this route? And we certainly help our customers do that each time we sell. It's whether you're ready for digital change or not, you still have to convince the CFO as to why we're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. It looks like those are all of the questions we have for today. So thank you so much to Eric for being an absolute rock star and fielding tons of questions. And thanks all of you in the audience for listening in and taking the time to join us today. And once again, thank you to our partners at Redwood for joining with us to present this content. We hope you enjoyed the presentation today and hope you'll join us again for another webinar again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.